Hello, I'm Richard Kauntze, Chief Executive of the British Council for Offices, the BCO, and welcome to the latest in our series of interviews we call the Office Briefing. Now, today's interview focuses on the office from what we might call a construction perspective, and where better to turn than the BCO's President, Robin Brodie Cooper. So welcome, Robin.
Hi.
Hi, Robin. Good morning. Very good to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining me today. Now, Robin is very well known in our world, but for those who may not be familiar with his career, let me tell you a little bit about him. Now, Robin qualified as a chartered surveyor at Gardner and Theobald in 1985, but moved swiftly to Gleeds, where he has been, so he tells me, for the last 34 years and 11 months. And that's the sort of attention to detail we like to see from a quantity surveyor. Robin started his professional life working on shopping centres. He dabbled in the residential market, but then focused principally on offices and therefore, of course, the BCO. Robin's notable office projects over the years have included the Mobile HQ in Kingsway, Riverside House, 10 Fen Avenue and number 1 London Bridge. And before being appointed as the BCO's president, Robin served for many years as our honorary treasurer and has been an outstanding supporter for well over 20 years, which is even longer than I've been around at the BCO. So let's get straight to questions, Robin, if I may. And my first theme for you, Robin, this morning is what we might call the market. Now, in your role as president of the BCO and a partner at Gleeds, you're very much at the heart of the UK's office industry. So accepting this, what is your sense of the mood of the market? And do you think it's optimistic or pessimistic?
Thank you, Richard. A good question. Well, when the pandemic struck last year and the government started implementing the lockdowns with no clue as at the time as how we were going to get ourselves out of this deadly virus from hitting us, and the Prime Minister instructed us all to stay at home, and the normal working way of life was turned upside down, I felt very pessimistic. The world was going in the opposite direction as to what I felt it should be going. And how would we get out of this predicament? We've seen the amazing work of our scientists producing various vaccines. And now that we've got that rollout going, my optimism for seeing the world getting back to work and the country getting underway again is definitely on the right side, and I can see business moving in the right direction. I mean, fortunately, the construction business throughout the pandemic has been constantly going, and we've been thrown into home working with Zoom and team meetings, and that was a blessing in disguise, because it actually kept the underlying role of the country going forward. The mood of the market is driven currently by a wall of money and ready to be invested. And I think with the vaccine rollout program and people starting to move around more freely, although we are still wearing masks, we can travel, we can internally only go to some countries with green lights and all the rest of it. But I am optimistic that things will pick up very quickly come July 19, when the Prime Minister hopefully will lift all embargoes. And with the last 15 months being on tick over, I think people will want to get things done. So I'm optimistic that a lot of quick decisions are going to be made, and we're going to see a real turnaround of business.
That's good to hear, Robin. I'm a natural optimist as well, like you. And it, as you rightly say, construction has kept going. It was one of the few sectors that really kept going pretty much uninterrupted during the worst of the lockdowns. And there is a lot of pent-up demand. The vaccine success has been truly astonishing. So let's just hope we really are out of the worst of this now. I think we probably are. although there will be some blips, no doubt. But let's get things cracking again. And on that theme, I'm going to come on to my next question, which really focuses on the occupier. And occupiers are rightly the most important component of the office industry. We create workspace for the ultimate client, and that is, of course, the occupier. And most offices have been empty for well over a year. So how do you think that the pandemic has changed the views of office occupiers, and how might that manifest itself in the longer term?
Another good question, Richard. The office occupier is made up of many different types of business models, and each business will react differently as to how they want to see their business operate. On the one hand, you've got the CEO of Goldman Sachs demanding that his staff all return to the office, whilst on the other hand, you've got the more tech firms asking their staff to stay at home and work from home, and they're embracing that sort of culture. Most of the firms are looking at a hybrid model and working 2 to 3 days in the office and the rest of the time working at home or elsewhere. This helps address mental and health issues, and I think over time people will fall into a pattern, and I think companies will have to sort of evolve and take cognizance of how their staff want to work and go forward. In the longer term, I see there will always be a place for the office, because that's where the culture of a business evolves, and people are able to meet and exchange ideas, and the young are able to learn from the old as they progress through their careers. The office may be used differently, and I see the space requirements required by occupiers may increase as they require social distancing and making offices less desk orientated and more of a meeting and place and exchange of ideas. People like to be with people, and providing you provide good safe space, I think we will see more of a return to the office than people staying at home.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, clearly over the last 15 months or so, there's been a lot of speculation, not least in these interviews, about the future of the office and where it will go and how it will manifest itself. But undoubtedly, I think to most of us, it will remain the anchor. But you mentioned Goldman Sachs, and I think we will see that there will be perhaps in some sectors, a pretty stark divide between the attitudes of various employers as to where they want their people to be, where they feel they should be. And we're already seeing that between the US banks and the UK and European banks, where there is quite a different sort of approach, or that there appears to be. But I think working with the workforce and getting a solution that works for that business and the people who provide the engine to that business, they're the biggest cost and the biggest asset, must be the way to go. And I'm going to sort of draw on that in my next theme, Robin, which is London. And most of us who are based in London were deeply shocked at seeing it virtually deserted during the worst of the pandemic as office workers stayed at home. But London will undoubtedly bounce back, even though some aspects of London life will probably never be quite the same again. Now, the office sector has long been fundamental to London's success. So how confident do you feel about the future of London's office market?
I'm feeling pretty confident about the future of our office market in London. Unlike the retail market and world, where many of the items you can go and purchase are bought online now, and we've slowly watched the decline of the retail unit. I think the office world is a very different dynamic. The office world will continue to grow, and there is no doubt that the way the office is used in the future will change, but it will not go away. Zoom and team meeting fatigue I think we've had it, we've had it up to our necks with that, and that's set in. And I think most of the office workers, certainly that I've met, are relieved to be able to get back to the office and have face-to-face meetings and share a joke or two. I mean, people are gregarious and feed off each other. The wall of money being invested in London office market will see new offices being created with great space to attract new occupiers who will then impose their own ideas on that space. So I feel, generally, the office market will bounce back, and hopefully it'll come back stronger and better. We've seen over the years, people have said, oh, the office market will die, the office is dead. It never has. The office is fundamental to doing business, and we need to make sure that we get as many people through our office, we meet them, we exchange ideas with them, and when they work from home, they're really doing sort of exercises that don't need to interact with other people. They just need to be able to get the job done and then come back to the office to disseminate what they've done. But I think as far as I feel and see, I think the office it'll change, but it'll never go away, and we'll probably get better offices because of what's happened.
I'm with you. I mean, I think London has an extraordinarily bright future once we're through the worst of this. You mentioned that sort of wall of money, Robin, you're absolutely right. Globally, and London is, along with New York, perhaps unique in the world because of what it can offer, and that money has to find a home somewhere, and the London office sector will always be part of that sort of global portfolio of assets. So I can't see that changing at all, and I think the quality of what we do in this country will lead to some ever more exemplars of outstanding office construction and development, and a lot of that will show itself in London in the years to come, I have no doubt. And I also agree that as occupiers evolve, their requirements and demands will change, and it's up to our sector to give them the product that they want. And I'm going to sort of come on to that a little bit more specifically with the next theme, Robin, which is design.
Mm-hmm.
And do you feel, Robin, that the pandemic will have a fundamental impact on how we both design and build our offices, or will we simply continue with the current trends and styles?
I think, on my personal view, I think the pandemic has made every designer, both architectural and mechanical and electrical, reevaluate how the office buildings are being designed and constructed, and how the hearts and the lungs of the buildings will operate. It is paramount that we offer a safe environment to the occupier, and fresh air and the like is very important following this pandemic. We're making massive inroads into how buildings are being ventilated, and this has been established in many ways, and mainly due to the virus being passed through air particles on exhalation by whoever's holding the virus. So I think the ventilation of buildings will change. You'll see far more natural ventilation coming into buildings, and air exchange and filters. And you'll also see other things like touch points in buildings being totally minimized. You'll walk into a building, you'll hardly have to touch anything in the future, which will minimize exchange of anything that anybody else has touched. So that's going to be, I think, one of the major criteria going forward. Occupiers will use their buildings differently, and I think the current trends and styles will change as the hybrid ways of working and drop-in space is created. We'll see a much more loose fit type of building, but it'll operate still as an office, still as a place for people to meet and do their business.
I agree. I think we will see some quite radical change, and it's going to have to be good. I mean, a phrase I've used in another context recently is better than home. And I think in the hybrid model, I think that will be ever more important for for many, they're going to have a reason to go to the office, which is really compelling, probably in the years to come, and clearly to meet colleagues and interact and all of the things that they want and need to do. But it's going to have to offer a space that really adds to the value proposition in all kinds of ways. And there's a lot of thinking that will need to be done in the months and years ahead on all of that. But I agree with you absolutely, Robin. And
it's not just the office, it's the transportation systems into our offices. They need to be they will need to be looked at very closely, because you cannot have people crowding onto trains and diving into, people. It's happening now already. You get on a train going into London and the trains are not big enough, long enough to take the spacing that people need. So you're starting to get crowding on trains, which is, people are getting worried about it again.
And I can see that. And for those of us who do commute regularly, I mean, one of the upsides of the pandemic has been, when we have been traveling, to have a very quiet train, and it's been a remarkably civilized experience. And you say that has changed more recently, and certainly I've noticed on the tube in London has become much busier than it was. But I think one potential upside from all of this is that we do actually have fantastic infrastructure in this country, in many parts of the country, and London perhaps more than any other, because so many people come in to work by public transport. And if they travel at perhaps slightly more rational times than they used to in the pre-pandemic world, the kit is actually very good. It's just the loadings that are the problem. But if you actually, can manage the flows in a more even way, rather than everybody being rammed on the same trains, then we're perhaps in for a much better experience. And
I think life-work balance will be a lot better for a lot of people if that was the case.
I agree. My next theme, Robin, the penultimate one, is sustainability. And the office sector rightly needs to do ever more to create a sustainable product. So, accepting this, do you feel that refurbishment is likely to become the default option rather than new build?
The regulations for new build and meeting embedded carbon targets are getting tougher and tougher to achieve, and all this comes at a price. We've seen a lot of refurbishment of buildings coming forward, but only those that can offer the right space and meet the occupier demand. I do not see refurbishment as being the default option. I think that before an existing building is either considered for refurbishment, or whether we drop it, a lot of exercises need to be done to establish, is it worth keeping, or actually at the end of the day, it's done its time, it needs to come out, and we need to put a new building in its place. It's a tricky one, but the numbers will always give you the answer. And if you can get a new build put in with all the latest technology and minimize the embedded carbon, it's probably best to put in a new building than keep the old building. So before one drops the old building, do the exercises and see what the best number is, and that'll probably give you the answer.
I'm with you. I suspect the due diligence will change and will become, it's always going to be nuanced anyway, and there are always going to be these marginal cases, but I could see the pendulum swing more to refurbishment rather than new build when the arguments are delicately balanced. I mean, clearly if a building is totally shot and is no longer fit for any useful purpose, it's going to have to come down. But I can see some change here, and perhaps some expectation of looking at some more imaginative solutions. But yes, it's got to be economic. It's got to stack up financially. Otherwise, it simply isn't going to happen.
I mean, most of the refurbished buildings are the old stock. They've got, I suppose, embedded additional structure within them. We had engineers of their time who made sure that that building would never fall down, and it probably couldn't take another couple of lightweight floors on top. So you'd keep the original structure and add a bit on top, and do it that way, because ultimately the client has got to try and get more floor space into that building to make more money. And that's a big driver in the calculations.
Understood. Now, my last theme, Robin, I've called favourites, and well, I hope you enjoy this one. Now, you've recently featured in the My Favourite Office series on the BCO's new digital notebook, and you nominated 52 Lime Street in the City of London, which is more commonly known, of course, as the Scalpel, as your favourite office, Robin. So why did you pick the Scalpel, and what else among your earlier or current projects during your career would you regard as standouts?
Right. Well, the Scalpel, well, it's an iconic tower. I mean, it sits in the eastern cluster of towers in the City of London. It's opposite the Lloyd's of London insurance building, which obviously is a fabulous building with all its external mechanical and electrical ventilation attached to the outside of the building. You've got across the way, diagonally across the way, you've got the cheese grater, and then you've also got the gherkin. When we did the Scalpel, it embraced at its time all the latest features and sustainable items we could put into that building. And it's got double stacked lifts, it's got facial recognition to go into the building. And I just think it looks a real sharp piece of design in that whole cluster. The design was really came about to keep all the views of St. Paul's from the various viewing points around the outskirts of London. So that sort of whole design and shape came about through that sort of keeping those corridors available. It always gives me great pleasure to see it on the TV on London Tonight after the main news. It's the center of the TV screen, and I always just think, what a great building it looks, and what a great team I worked with to get that built and put in place. So that's why I felt, it's something that I really enjoyed doing, and I think it'll be there for a long time. And when I fly into London, I can always look at it.
Well, it's a very worthy pick, and the BCO's office, of course, is in Leadenhall Street. So I walked past that site as the building was going up, every day for quite a long time, and it's going to be there for a long time. Seeing the amount of concrete that was poured in,
I don't think it'll be going anywhere fast. That's for sure. It's not a knockdown for a long time.
It's a very solidly put together building, and it is fascinating, that cluster of towers. And there, as you rightly say, Robin, the part of the design was because of the views of St. Paul's, and the way that it's very imaginative, and they all work together very well, I think, in that part of the city. And it's a great choice. So I can see why you picked it, and it must have been an absolutely fascinating project to work on.
I mean, you mentioned other outstanding building that I've worked on. I think one that I was proud to be associated with Riverside House on the south side of the Thames. We did a lot of exercises. It was an existing building. We did a number of exercises. Do we drop it? What do we do with it? The key rider was we would not be able, if we dropped it, we wouldn't get the height of the building, again, because of height restrictions at the time imposed by the various planning regulations. So we kept the building at the same height. I'm trying to think if we added anything on top. I don't think we did. But what the architect did do was extend the floor plates out towards the Thames, and he hung them all off a steel structure that looked like a spinnaker, or a similar to my belly after a very nice meal. And you go out into the Thames, and it's quite a fabulous fabulous looking building. It's right by the Millennium Bridge, and in fact, if every time someone takes a movie of the Millennium Bridge with James Bond running across it or whatever, or flying under a boat underneath it, you'll always see Riverside House in the background, because you can't miss it because of the spinnaker structure of the external steelwork. And that was a fascinating building to build. And we built it with Bovis. If anybody remembers Bovis, younger people won't, but the older generation will. And it was a fantastic a bit of work, and on time, on budget, and everyone was very pleased with it.
Very interesting project. Well, I think I can safely say, Robin, that it's the first time any of my guests has mentioned a belly in one of these interviews. So you scored a hit there, and that's probably an appropriate point on which to end. And sadly, we are out of time, but it's been absolutely fascinating, and I'm very grateful to you, Robin. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and look forward to catching up soon.
Well, indeed so, Robin. Thank you very much. To all of you, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Office Briefing as much as I have. And until next time, from Robin and from me, thank you very much and goodbye.